Hey, what's going on, y'all? Hope everyone's having a blessed day. If well, before I get into it, let me just say, you know, if you don't know, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a practicing attorney. And if you're seeking legal advice, go to your local county's attorney's office and get the proper definitions or whatever it is that you're looking for, the legal advice that you're looking for. Don't get it here. This is a general statement by someone that's been through the bankruptcy process. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what to do after your bankruptcy. Like, a lot of times, people don't know exactly when to start applying for credit. Can you apply for your credit while you're waiting for your discharge and all that? And I just want to walk you through the bankruptcy process. Some of you might be sitting there thinking about filing a bankruptcy and don't really know the process. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about it to bring some clarity to the bankruptcy process. And this is going to be filing a Chapter 7. Now, those of you that don't know, there's a difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Okay, so I'm right now talking about Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Now, the difference between the Chapter 7 and the Chapter 13 bankruptcy. The Chapter 13 bankruptcy is a payment plan. Okay, it's a payment plan that usually lasts, 3 to 5 years. You have to pay back your debts, and you go through and you're settling what you're going to pay, and you're making a payment plan. A Chapter 7 is when you're asking for a fresh start. Now, that fresh start is not a complete fresh start. There are some debts that you can't discharge in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. One is you cannot discharge student loans. For you to discharge student loans in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, you have to show that basically you can't pay that money back. Maybe it could be something medically wrong with you, but it's going to have to be something major because the government wants that money back. I'm not talking private loans. I'm talking about student loan that came what is it called? Government student loans. Okay. Anytime the government backs student loans, those loans are really hard to um, to discharge in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Okay, so a Chapter 7 is a fresh start. And I want to start by talking a little bit about the process. Okay, so what happens during the process? So the first thing is you're sweating bullets because you're trying to decide, should I file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? What's going to happen? How long is it going to take for me to recover? The emotional stress, the spiritual stress that you go through. You feel, I will say, you feel like a loser. You feel really bad. And you're going through all this turmoil within yourself. You're struggling back and forth mentally that, man, I can't do this. It's terrible. It's wrong. We're taught pay all your debts. You're taught all these things. And at some point you draw to the conclusion because you have so much debt hanging over your head that you're like, I can't seem to get above water, and it's gonna take a long time for me to recover. Whatever it is, maybe you went through something medically, maybe you lost your job and you're just financially drowning because you had to live off your credit cards, whatever it is, and the road to recovery is so heavy that at that point you start thinking about bankruptcy, right? And so usually what happens is you get this one phone call and they may say something threatening to you, and at that point that's when you make the decision, I have to file bankruptcy. That's usually what happens, from talking to people. that's filing bankruptcy or thinking about filing bankruptcy. It's usually a long process of thinking, and then there's one phone call that's made by a collector that pushes somebody over the edge to know, I have to file bankruptcy. I can't continue like this. So you start reaching out to attorneys, and they all have different ways of pricing a bankruptcy, right? Now there's a filing fee, right? There's a filing fee that everyone has to file, and that's for your state, right? And remember, we're talking about Chapter 7 bankruptcies, not Chapter 13. So you go to your attorney, and they're telling you the prices. Now it's going to vary depending on your situation. All right, so no, don't be like, well, I paid $1,200 and you had to pay $1,500 or whatever. It's not one price fits all. Sometimes there's certain situations that will drive a price up or down. Okay, so I see that question a lot in forums. Is my bankruptcy too much? Right? And I'll talk a little bit about, should you have an attorney when you're filing bankruptcy? Now, here's the thing. You do not have to file a bankruptcy with an attorney. You can file it on your own. But there's a step that I'm going to talk to you about, and that's the meeting of creditors. Are you comfortable enough to have a conversation with your collectors face to face? And do you know what to say? Right? Because they're going to ask you questions, and if you don't know what to say, you may need legal representation at that point in time. So when you decide that you want to hire an attorney, let's just say, what happens is you file your paperwork with your court office, with the proper office, and at that point they issue an automatic stay. All right, that's what it's called. It's an automatic stay. And what an automatic stay is, it basically relieves any collections against you. It prevents, and like I said, I don't know all the legal jargon, but I'm just trying to give you a generality of what's going on. At that point, all your collectors has to cease collecting debt for whatever it is that you owe. Let's say you have a 5 credit cards that you're putting into your bankruptcy, right? Well, what happens is, when you file that paperwork, the court's office is going to notify all your collectors. They're going to mail them a letter, and they're going to notify them that you have filed a bankruptcy and they no longer can collect your debt until after the meeting of creditors. They're going to give them a date that if they have any issues with the debt that's owed to them, to show up to court on this date, and you guys can hash it out then. All right, and that's going to be in the meeting of creditors, and they're going to issue a date, and that's usually after you file. It's anywhere from 1 to 2 months. It's not really long after you file that you have that meeting of creditors. Okay, and so you file the paperwork. Now, you may still get calls from collectors, like people trying to collect the debt, and all you have to do is say, I just want to let you know I filed bankruptcy, and here's the court number, right? Or your filing number, your information, and they can go to the court system and look it up, but they will be notified by the courts that you have filed bankruptcy, and at that point they will stop. It's like a magic bullet that stops all collections. I don't care if you're in a foreclosure. I don't care what kind of debt you have over you. It stops at that point until, you and the courts meet and figure out what you owe and what you don't owe. All right? Because just because you file a Chapter 7 doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to owe debt, right? So what happens is you file your paperwork, you get your automatic stay. The courts are going to contact your creditors, and at that point, you're free. You don't have any debts that you're going to be paying on that's wrapped up into your bankruptcy. All right. So you may have, let's just say furniture, some credit cards, a whole bunch of, a couple of cars or whatever it is that you owe. You're putting that into your Chapter 7 bankruptcy, right? So 30 days after you file, let's say 1 to 2 months after you file, you have this meeting of creditors. Now, in this meeting of creditors, it may seem intimidating, but it's really not. If you don't have, uh, what is it called? Collateralized loans. Like, let's say, you have a car loan or something. If it's all just credit cards and stuff like that, chances are your debt collectors will not show up to the meeting of creditors. Don't hold me against, uh, don't hold me accountable if you go to your meeting and your creditors show up. Don't be like, well, Kenny, you said they weren't going to show up. Nah, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, when I went to mine, I showed up early to my meeting of creditors, and it was quite interesting. I'll share something with you. I ended up having an attorney, and let's say mine was supposed to be at 2 o'clock. I can't remember what the time was that I was supposed to show up, but I showed up at like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, and I watched all these cases beforehand so that I can get an idea of what it would be like for my meeting, right? Because I was nervous. I didn't know what to expect. I went online to read as much as I can. I read some horror stories, and I read some easy stories. And so I just wanted to get an in-person view. So I showed up and I sat in court. You can actually go in the courtroom and you can listen to people's cases, right? People that are filing bankruptcy. There's a trustee there, and he's the one that's basically mediating the conversation between you and your creditors, right? He's going to be the mediator. They're going to go over all your debts, everything that you put down in your bankruptcy. And if there's somebody that says, hey, you have a car with us, what do you plan on doing with the car? At that point, you guys can figure out what you want to do. Like, let's say you had you're behind on your payments. You guys can hash that out right there in court and come up with a plan on what you guys are going to do, whether you decide to turn the car in, whatever it is. That's when they have that conversation with you at the meeting of creditors, right? They can't call you up and say, hey, look, we want our money, until your discharge or whatever it is. You guys hash it out at the meeting of creditors. All right. So I showed up early and I sat through cases, and I would say 90% of the cases, no creditors ever showed up. I would say it's even higher than 90%. It was probably like 99%. Like, there was only a couple of cases where creditors showed up. And so when it became my turn, my attorney showed up. We had a quick conversation. I got in front of the trustee, and the trustee asked me my name. I swore in, and they asked me all these basic questions like, what about this debt? What do you plan on? I had a trailer that I owned that still had some equity in it. We had to decide what we were gonna do with it, and it really wasn't that hard. It wasn't a hard process. Like I said, none of my creditors showed up. After you have that meeting, and it's like a 3 to 5 minute meeting, like, well, depending on what you're including in your bankruptcy, but like I always tell people, I had close to 200 or over $200,000 in my bankruptcy that I was filing Chapter 7 on because I had a lot of business that I was taking out of my personal name, right? So there was maybe 3 to 5 minutes, no creditors. And he's like, okay, did you learn anything about the process? And I told him, yeah, I'm not going to get myself in a situation again. And that was it. Shook my attorney's hand. And uh, two, about two, I don't know. I want to say it was about 3 to 5 months after that, I received a letter. Well, let me back up. Before the meeting of creditors, you have to take these classes. And there's a discharge certificate that you have to complete. And what that class is just a class to say, you know, it's just basically a financial class. It's not hard. It's really remedial. It's you at the end of it, you get a certificate. You file that with the court, and it's a discharge certificate. You file that with the court, and about 3 months later, you get your discharge. All right. So you once everything is said and done, and when you're filing Chapter 7, and you get that discharge, there's an overwhelming feeling of relief that happens. All the turmoil of feeling bad, all of the I don't know, the angst, the the negative energy. Once you get that letter and you realize you don't have this huge debt hanging over your head, you have this this feeling. It's kind of a mixed feeling. It's kind of a bittersweet because you're really happy that you don't have the debt, but now you have a jacked up credit report. And that's what I want to talk to you guys. I said all that to get to this point. Don't beat me up too bad for rambling, okay? So you finally get to the point where um you got your Chapter 7 discharged. Whether it's a Chapter 7 or a 13, once you get your 13s usually last a little bit longer. But once all your debts are discharged, people always ask me, when do I apply for credit after a bankruptcy? When you have your discharge papers, that's when you start building credit. At that point, no time sooner than that. You want your bankruptcy to discharge, and then once everything is discharged, that's when you want to start applying for credit again. Now, in my situation, there was credit cards that I had. I established relationships with certain banks, Capital One, Barclay. There was some other credit cards that I had that, due to the fact that, I put them into a bankruptcy, they may not reestablish that relationship with me again because I walked away from, that credit card debt. So you weigh all that out. So what you want to do is you want to go to those companies. There's tons of great credit cards out there, credit card issuers out there. So you go to the credit card issuers that that you didn't put into your bankruptcy. So chances are there's not going to be a lot of companies that's going to give you a chance, right? So you can start with secure credit cards, right? That's probably what you're going to have to start with, secure credit cards. And you're going to have to find companies, that graduate your secure credit cards. I always talk about graduating secure credit cards. And if you can't, like, for example, let's say you have a Discover It and you're trying to get a Discover It card, what you want to do is you want to apply for a secured Discover It. They may not accept you because you're fresh off of bankruptcy. And so what you want to do is you might want to go apply for an Open Sky secure credit card. And that's one of the things about Open Sky that I really like, is that they give opportunities for those that are trying to reestablish credit. So even if you're not, in a bankruptcy or just filed a bankruptcy and you got poor credit, then Open Sky is a really good credit card to start with. There's some others, but one of the things that you want to make sure is that they report to all three credit bureaus. I just recently had a client that had a prepaid credit card that didn't report and didn't realize that company didn't report to the credit bureaus. They called me up and they said, "Hey, do you know anything about this card?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know about it." And they said, "Well, it's not on my credit report." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's not gonna be on your credit report. They don't report to the credit bureaus." So you just gotta know what you're dealing with. And so what you do is you look and you go through the terms and conditions and you go through everything, and the interest rate's going to be high, but you got to get that first piece of credit. Now that when you file, you may be in the low fives when you file. And when you file bankruptcy, it's going to jack your credit report up a little bit, your credit scores. And when you're in the low fives, you get that first credit card. Initially, your score's not going to jump up, high. But over time, it's going to start increasing, and it's in no time you're going to be in the sixes. That's what I always try and tell you guys. It's easier for me to get you from the 500s, or the 400s to the 600s than it is to get you from the 600s to the 700s. Those jumps from 600s to 700s, it takes a little bit more time, and you have to be a little bit more solid. And so getting 600 FICO scores is not a hard thing to do. You could do that within 2 to 3 months. And what does that mean when you're in the 600s? It just means that you can qualify for more things. And that's when you start getting your unsecured credit cards and your unsecured revolving lines of credit, right? And there's other little tricks that you can do to get into the 600s. So back to like what I was saying is, you apply for that Open Sky, and then you would go to a company like a My Jewelers or a New Coast Direct, and you apply with these companies. So when you apply for a My Jewelers, they report to all three credit bureaus, and they will give you a credit line of 5,000, right? You apply for a New Coast Direct, and they'll give you a credit line of 5,000, but they only report to TransUnion and Equifax. But you're getting positive items on your credit report to boost your credit score up, so you can apply for unsecured credit cards, right? What you want to be able to do is walk into a bank and get approved for a loan, whether you're a truck driver and you want to get approved for a truck or trailer, or if you you want to get a personal vehicle. You have to have some type of credit history of good payments to show that you're worthy of being lent this money. And that's what you're doing sometimes. And I just had a conversation with somebody today, but they were asking me, can I get like a self-lender loan? Or actually, we were talking about New Coast Direct. Can I get an item and just pay it off? And I was telling them, what you're trying to show is good payment history, right? So if you pay it off, your score won't drop, but the ultimate goal is to show that you have a good payment history, right? So get you something small from New Coast Direct or My Jewelers, and then just pay that $35. Don't get something like that's $1,200 from New Coast Direct, because they inflate their prices, right? But just get something small and just build your credit up. And some of you might go, well, Kenny, you don't really believe in New Coast Direct and my jewelers. And I'm here to say I use it as a tool, right? I just use it as a tool. I believe secure credit cards are better, right? Because when you're talking about secure credit cards, it's teaching you the responsibility of paying credit cards and handling credit cards. If you can't handle a $250 credit card, you're not going to be able to handle a $25,000 credit card, right? And so it's just putting you in the habit of understanding how revolving lines of credit affect your credit score. You're not going to get that with a $5,000 My Jewelers account because you're not going to ever get into, well, I hope you don't ever go to My Jewelers and spend $2,500. So you're not going to ever have a 50% utilization rate with a My Jewelers. And that education that you're missing out on, it is far worth more than just points on a credit report, right? Because long term, what we're trying to establish is good habits. And that's what this whole game is about. So those of you that are going through bankruptcy, um, you guys wrapped up some credit cards or whatever in your bankruptcy. There's other items and there's other things that you can do to build credit to get you to the next point, right? Because we want to get back into a home or get into a home, or we want to get a loan so that we can go purchase a car so we can continue employment without having to worry about breakdowns on the way to work, right? So just understand that there's a process to the credit building stage. It's going to take a little bit of patience. It's going to take a little bit of hard work, but it can be done. It's nothing that's rocket science. Don't worry about deleting items. When you get discharged, the very first thing you want to start doing is building credit from day one, right? You don't need to wait 3 weeks after your discharge. You get your discharge paperwork. At that point, you start rolling, right? That's when you start applying for credit. Get you a open sky. If you have to get a My Jewelers, but just understand there's not a lot of credit card companies that's going to mess with you at the very beginning, but over time. And when I say time, I'm not talking about years, but over time, I'm talking about months, right? It's not going to take you long for these companies to say, hey, look, this person's getting back on their feet. We want to give them a chance. And that's what this game is about. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, please give me a thumbs up on this one. If you guys get a chance to subscribe to this channel, please do so. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. You guys drive safe, you truck drivers out there, and everyone else, God bless. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.